and we're going to try and jam these people through so that you don't have to stay too long, especially for people that have to get away early this evening. Our first speaker today is Buster Anderson, and he will be continuing on with the theme of freedom technology. I'll be giving you some more evidence about the possibilities that are there and how we can go about researching this and finding individuals that are doing or involved in this type of technology. So I'd like to introduce Buster Anderson. Buster.
Good morning, everybody. It's good to have you here. I'll start off. There's in the back on that table, there's two handouts, one in health, one in energy. Spend maybe 5 or 10 minutes on the health first. I was back about 20 years ago, and I've spent about $15,000 on trying to get better, going to about 5 doctors, naturopaths, iridologists, and stuff. And I thought I'd share some information that helped me, and if anybody wants to follow up on them, it for themselves, or if they know of people like their family members or stuff, it might save them quite a bit of money and help them get better faster than what happened for me. Probably, and I've kind of listed what I found worked best for me in order first. And Terry Bell and the people he's trained, that I think quite a few people have seen muscle testing where they hold, say, a herb here, the arm is outstretched, and they push down to find out whether it increases your muscle strength or decreases it. And there was a person, he used stress gauges, which you might find interesting, and he would test their muscle strength, whether it increased or decreased. And Terry Bell, he had a heart attack when he was 28. He went to, he had 4 heart attacks by the time he was 28, and a Chinese person put him on herbs, and he got better so much that he became Canadian kickbox champion. And another Chinese person showed him how to muscle test, and instead of your arm stretched, you use this finger stretched out, and this finger pushes down to test. And what you do is you can count to 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, and it'll drop at the percent that your organ is down, or how effective or how potent or how efficient each herb is for each person. And what he is doing is he's matching up what each person needs specifically for their body. And what I found is what general herbs, what a lot of naturopaths or iridologists recommend, didn't work because it wasn't tuned specifically for me. And for about $150 worth of herbs, over 2 months, I started noticing a difference in 4 days improvement. And I was heading for MS, a wheelchair, and lymphatic cancer, and I would have been in the hospital by now if it wasn't for him. And if you skim over the third page there, that's kind of a general overview of the different herbal combinations he has for different diagnoses. But again, it's best to go to him specifically for testing to see what the underlying problem is. The next page is a number of testers that have been trained underneath him just for the Alberta. There's also a list for Saskatchewan, Manitoba, BC, that if you contact that 1888 number, you get the information. The last sheet is the first column is percent down, which different parts of my body were down, and in just 3 months, how the percents have dropped down just from taking 2 or 3 herbal combinations. And what they're finding out is the more herbs you take, the more they can start interfering with each other and start reacting. And that's where a lot of people, they can spend $1,000. And people, he's had people fly from Iran, Europe, overseas to come to him because they've heard about him. He's been doing this for about 19, 20 years. And he analyzes about 13,000 to 14,000 people a year. And it's a little bit confusing when you first go to him because he does it so fast. In 20 minutes, he just counts, touches different parts of your body. Like this point is cancer, this point is calcium, this point is Candida yeast. And I would suggest him for any fine-tuning that you need to do. And my body stayed for about 1.5 years, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And so I tested different waters, and he can test, and like for me, This will drop at 60%, 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. My finger will go weak at 60%, and you can train yourself to do this after a while. And what I would suggest is going to somebody, schedule an extra session, say, I would like to learn how to do this, show me how to do it, and let me practice. And you just start off with simple yes and no, or percent, and then go on from there. I've tried dowsing with a pendulum, because my dad could water witch with a willow stick. And a pendulum, if you try that, what I found, you start off with a high-strength magnet, north and south pole, and you have to get the resonant strength on the pendulum in order to have it swing one way or the other. And when you find those different resonant wavelengths on the string, then you just put a little knot, and then that'll help save you, so you can just pick it up. But that's a little bit, it's not as fast and accurate. And at the back there's a radionics machine. A skilled practitioner can also test and diagnose different things. The most famous was Ruth Down. She analyzed 30,000 people back in the 30s. When she first started, she was so good the Rockefellers gave her a gold medal. When they found that it was going to be cutting into their business, they took her and charged her with court and caused her to shorten her life prematurely because of that. Live blood analysis is also excellent for hard copy of what's going on in your system. And there was another person who was mentioning that Mrs. Gavro does that. And there's a number of people doing that. And I was checking into clinics in Mexico, and it was $9,000 US for 2 weeks of ozone therapy, vitamins and stuff. And with this knowledge, you can save and get better within $100 to $200 a month, plus the expenses for diagnosing different things. And Terry Bell's had people come to him with all kinds, arthritis, cancer, rheumatism, MS. And he believes primarily with the Chinese that the fundamental problem 90 to 95% of the time is the colon. And he gives cleansing herbs to cleanse out the body, and then he gives rejuvenating herbs in order to build it up again. And he believes he usually picks the two main ingredients that the body needs, but there's other people that have trained underneath him. If you want to get better faster, you ask for the next 4 or 5 most important vitamins, supplements, or herbs, and when to take them. And that's another nice thing. He tells you how much and when to take them. And if a herb is specific for you, you can overload it or take it at the wrong combinations. And I find if I test for foods like meat or eggs, a lot of this is junk in the store, and so I'll pick out the best quality. And that's another thing that the doctors aren't telling you, how the food quality has dropped. And now with zero-till and farming, which my background in is, we're spraying on sprays almost the whole growing season, and it's drifted into even organic fields. But especially the foods that we're buying now, it's overloaded with sprays. And I kind of make reference to like how fast the damage is showing up for microwave food, genetic engineered food, and stuff like that people aren't being told and aren't aware of, and they don't realize the damage it's causing to people's systems. And if you want to put a star beside ozone therapy, there's a website where you can go to. What you do is basically you sit in a plastic booth or fiberglass booth, the door swings shut, your head's exposed, and you can either sit in shorts or swimming trunks or bare naked, and the steam inside opens up your pores, and then they inject medical grade ozone. And there was a company called Metazone. What they would do is they would take blood from one arm, run it through an ozone machine, and inject it in the other arm. And they were curing, of 12 people with AIDS, I think either 10 or 11 showed up not even AIDS positive after about 12 injections. And they thought it was so fantastic they would get FDA approval and start marketing it. And FDA dragged it out so much that they've gone bankrupt. And there's a tape at the end, or the second page, I think, Ozone and the Politics of Medicine, which covers ozone therapy and the vast benefits. And I found out that's the best way of clearing chemical buildup, cancer, viruses, bacteria, and AIDS. Another lady, she had genital warts, and that would be something she'd have to live with the rest of her life. In 2 sessions with ozone, it was cured up. And I would suggest if you go to them, they have funnels they can place over your forehead. I had chemical buildup in my pineal gland and stuff. And also, I had prostate troubles. Chemicals building up there in my liver, and so you hold the funnel over. There's different places. If you have breast cancer, hold it over the breast, and that will help tremendously in clearing out a lot of this stuff, and then allowing the body to heal. And then you can go to herbs, vitamins, and supplements. And the cost is minimal with these booths, about $30 for half an hour session. Whereas if you go to like the Mexico Clinic, like I said, it's $9,000 US for 2 weeks, and about $15,000 US for 3 weeks. And a lot of the people come home, and because they don't have a support system, they get sick after another year or two, and a lot of them run out of money before they get better. Eh? So that basically summarizes my health section.
You mentioned multiple sclerosis. What about
ALS?
That's the Lou Gehrig.
I'm not familiar with it, but what Terry Bell does and his people, they diagnose which part of the... They're not so much concerned with the names of the diseases they're working with. They want to diagnose if there's heavy metals building up in the liver, or if your colon is down 20 or 30% or whatever, wherever the main problem is. And then they have a booklet so that Terry Bell's analyzed and tested herbs, and so they might, like for liver, there might be 10 herbs that he could suggest that a person take, and then he would go through and pick the one most potent and absorbable for that person to help clear that herb out. And while I'm thinking of that, I was down on calcium, and I picked out 5 different calciums, tried them, and the one tested out not too bad. When I took it to him, they had heavy metals inside this calcium. It was building up in my liver. That's why I started reacting to it, so it was causing more damage. And I found an excellent colloidal mineral, and he tested it, and he's really happy with it. And it balanced out my system with just a quarter of a tablespoon. And there's a Joe Wallach, MD, he talks about the importance of minerals and how it's fundamental for people's health. And again, our soils, we're pumping nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and we're not getting the calcium, magnesium, and the people are getting deficient, and that's why these kids are growing up unhealthy and sick and can't concentrate in school. And I thought distilled water was so great, and what I was finding, it was dropping on me, and so when I took it to a guy to get tested, I had him go through the list of possible contaminants, and it showed up that the nickel was contaminating the water and building up in my system, and that the nickel was leaching out from the stainless steel. And if you know this, then you can go to them for general, start that stuff, and then fine-tune it for where the pollutants and stuff are coming into your houses or into your system from the different sources. And Halder Clark is probably one of the best people for pointing out different contaminants for people, where they're coming from, and the importance of removing them. And the medical establishment doesn't tell you that. All they do is basically give you drug, chemo, or radiation. And it's $1 billion a year, $1 billion a day industry in North America, so you can see why they want to, well, and it's Rockefellers are backing it. But anyway, moving on to the energy overview, I understand that there's some tapes kind of giving an overview of energy sources, where the energy is coming from. And my background is 1 year pre-med, 4 years mechanical engineering. I didn't graduate. I started studying into high mother's carburetors back in 78, 79, got into zero-point or over-unity devices in 83 when I went to a conference in Atlanta, Georgia. I was in a partnership, farming and oil field from a family, and we spent about $60,000 per year in total in energy costs, electrical and hydrocarbons. And so for us, any saving at all would be quite beneficial, and then I could use that for a business to get going and for whatever else. And there's hundreds of patents out there. The best patent is Progue. Back in the 1930s, Ford Motor Company tested it, got slightly over 200 miles per gallon Canadian. The U.S. government, let's see, I guess I'm running out of time here. Okay. The U.S. government's used it in World War II in the African desert, and that's how they defeated Rommel, because they didn't have to have so many fuel lines and fuel trucked in and stuff. Basically, the oil companies, what they did is they changed the fuel mixture from a fuel that vaporized all at 120 degrees and had additives and stuff, so that some of it wouldn't vaporize at all. And that's what's defeated a lot of people from the controls in order to have it so it'll work consistently over all the ranges. And people have heard of companies buying up patents. Patent there is right on the patent, it says Assignee Ford Motor Company. And people think, well, they have so much money, they buy up any patent. Basically, what I've tried, the 1 over unity device that I was trying, it was so expensive, it wouldn't be profitable for the average person to get into, so I contacted a number of utility companies in Canada to see if I could drum up some interest in order to raise manufacturing or distribution rights in Canada. And I found that generally people at the top that can make decisions are so busy that they don't have time, number one. Number two, it has to be extraordinary proof in order to prove anything that's out of the scientific realm. And number three is, like Ford Motor Company, they receive so many things like this per year. If it's anything good, usually they try to have their engineers work around it in patenting or whatever. And one company spent 20 years trying to design around power steering, and they never did get as good job as the original inventor. And they had to wait until the patent expired before they got a hold of the original patent. Now, the GEAT device is probably the most promising for all-around beneficial. I flew down there, rode in a 78 Suburban truck, 4x4, and I give a website there, and it's difficult to get in to purchase anything. The Canadian rights have been bought up by somebody, and he's got a pretty high, he wants half of the royalties, basically, is what he wants, or half of the profits of anything. But you can download the plans, put it on your vehicle if you want to spend the time doing it. And again, it's the problem that's holding back is control and vaporizing it consistently and stuff. But it's possible to use crude oil and up to an 80% mix of water to run your vehicles or whatever, and work best on stationary engines. And it'd be nice to have a solid-state electrical device that would power your car, but the trouble is, for converting your vehicle over, it's going to be about 10 grand for the electrical motors, battery pack for excess power and controls. So again, if something low cost like this, low pollutant, comes out, I'm still looking for something like that. There was one, George Wiseman is probably one of the top researchers in North America. He has a website I list in there. There's been several times with Brown's gas that they've had tremendous amounts of Brown's gas put off over the electrical input, but there's been no times consistently when they've been able to duplicate that. And I know several researchers that are trying to come up with a consistent, duplicable method of doing that, but until that, it's under Unity in general. But that would be good. I list, okay, Gunnerman's working with CAT. I have a brief overview of that, and the patent is listed there. You can go on websites and go right into the patent offices in both in U.S., Canada, and IBM has a good site for checking into patents. The next patent, basically what you do is you screw out the spark plug, and he has a Y adapter. The one part acts as a spark plug, and the other part is the control mechanism, check valve, and he has a heater to vaporize the water into steam, and then he runs it through a catalytic conversion process, and then the catalytic conversion process goes into this Y, and there's another catalytic conversion with the heat where it cracks it. And my partners phoned him, and he claims he's had a vehicle run at 5,000 hours. It's got 3 offers on the table, and it's too high for us to get into. Probably for money, we'll have to wait and see who gets it and if they're willing to put it onto the market. And NASA came up and did a test, but they required that he do it on hydrocarbons. And what it did is it gummed up the catalyst converter. So he doesn't have it running yet. Let's see. Aqua Fuel, in the second page there, about halfway down, I gave a phone number. They got about 4 times the output of Brown's gas, and that's slightly over Unity, but again, because the internal combustion engine is only about 30 to 40% efficient, it's not a lot of excess energy to be working with. Magnet gas is working with something. And the Joe cell, that's the most amazing. Okay, these companies, basically what you have to do if you want to invest, you'll have to try to phone them and see if they're private or if they're gone public yet. If they've gone public, that's the easiest to buy stock. If it's private, like Blacklight Power, they wanted, I think it's minimum 30,000 US blocks now for shares, and it's private. There's 2 or 3 people, what they're trying to do is have mutual funds set up to invest in unconventional energy technologies, but so far nobody's got one off the ground yet. They're close to lining up people and stuff. And the most amazing is what's called the JoCell inventor in Australia. It's stainless steel plates and tubes inside of each other, concentric, about this tall, about this wide, and he has a stainless steel cone. And he draws the energy off, and it goes into the aluminum part of the engine. And he's converted 17 engines to work over it, including diesel. I've been emailing different people. There's one person in Melbourne, he says he's converted over 4 vehicles, including cast iron, which is most difficult. And there's no energy input other than 20 watts to charge up the water inside. And I list a website where you can go download the information, because it's culturing the water, which is really fussy and difficult. And it works on Oregon energy, or possibly, or deuterium is produced. And the best search engine that I found is Google, and I list it usually at back of the health and the back of the energy. And for me, the internet is just fantastic, and with used computers going for anywhere from $100, $200 to $700 for a pretty good one, it's one of the best investments I made. Cold fusion, I haven't really done much with it. Blacklight Power is probably the leading firm in the world right now with that. And there's hundreds of millions of dollars being spent on cold fusion, but you still have to convert the heat to electrical or some usable form. And anyway, Blacklight Power, if you're thinking of any cold fusion firm, that would be the best one I'd look into or check into further. Heat pumps, I wanted to point out that just because there's suppression out there, it doesn't mean that the inventors are scam artists or raised a lot of money from people without giving them any return. And Dennis Lee is probably the one that's raised one of the largest amounts of money without investors getting anything back for their money. And I believe he did, well, I've seen tests where he's got coefficient performance of 5.81, I think, in either Minnesota or Michigan over winter, which is double what a conventional heat pump would do. And on that, he does have something, and I went back when he got put in jail. There was a grant from the U.S. government or subsidy for heat pump installations, and if he could have kept on going on that, he could have raised or sold millions of dollars worth of heat pumps in the States. But by the utility companies in Washington blocking them, they stopped a lot of those sales from occurring. And myself and a partner are checking into a modification of heat pump technology, which would be pretty low cost in cost per net watt. I give a listing of some of the historical people and Energy Point devices. The Parago was demonstrated U.S. Congress, and nobody has uncovered the patent application until just lately, and I paid good money for a hard copy of the patent application. But again, with some of these devices, the coils are such a funny arrangement, and unless it's exactly fine-tuned like that in the Hendershot, nobody's been able to duplicate it. Even Hendershot's son is still working on replicating his father's invention. The Palo Ancoria device in Canada, that's proven, and I believe it works, and he uses vacuum tubes, pulses it at a certain voltage, and at certain voltage and certain pulses he's getting anywhere from 10 to 100 times the amount of energy out. And he's been negotiating with Ontario Hydro for about 2 or 3 years, I think, and some other big corps. And the trouble is, when something's so good, usually it's such big money involved, it's difficult for a little guy to get in. But again, I'm kind of keeping track, and if he does come out with something. Harold Aspen has been a big real help for the over Unity, because he was former head of IBM's European patent division. Evgrade device, somebody's uncovered the original prototype, 6 of them, and that's on KeelyNet, and you can see the pictures of them, and they need to basically check the wiring, and the capacitors they'll have to try to replace. And he got shut down by the SEC. They took his prototypes, shut him down, and I talked to a guy that tested it afterwards, and he was an electrical engineer, and he was going around the country in a trailer trying to get from being stopped further. And I think part of the problem was, again, with the high voltage capacitors that can handle 5,000 volts and the amount of current that he was using, it's probably pretty high cost. But again, with volume manufacturing runs, they could bring that cost down. Joe Newman is the best documented over Unity, and he's got a bad name in the over Unity field because of the amount of money he's brought in, the claims he's made, and he's paid people to make prototypes and stuff, and then he'll take the prototype on them. That's the one side there. On Joe Newman's side, he spent $2 million trying to get a patent because not protected by a patent. If anybody duplicates this device, they can sell it in the U.S. without having to pay him royalties. So there's both viewpoints, but his is the most proven. And the next page is contact information for myself or people that might be interested in updates, or if they want to invest in something, they can fill that out, send it to me either by mail or at the end of the meeting or whatever. Bill Mueller's, I haven't seen anything that's demonstratable over Unity, but there's his website if you want to take a look at it. KeelyNet.com is probably one of the best sites where people exchange email messages over the world on different devices. You can go in there, and then there's a search engine so that you can pick out any subject you're interested in, carburetors, whatever. The last about 10 pages after my contact information is an executive summary of over Unity devices, and this is basically the same information I sent on BC Hydro, Manitoba Hydro, Sask Power and stuff. And this is a good overview of what the cost per net watt is of the different devices and the payback period. And just because something's over Unity doesn't mean it's going to pan out. You have to look at the cost to see if it pays back. And basically, probably the best device is 800%. It's a motor controller that chops the input signal into 30,000 pulses per second. And the cost of that retail for 50 horsepower, 37 kilowatt is going to be about 35,000 US. And okay, if anybody's interested in following up, please contact me.
That's for the prototype, right?
Yeah, no, that's for retail. And if anybody's interested in following up on that project, you can contact me further, either through this contact information, email, or whatever afterwards. And just, there's a possibility, like the transistors are the most expensive part of the device, and they're about 500 US per transistor. They use about 10 or 12 of them, and you'll have a really high efficiency motor. For a description of it, about this size. They can build them really small now, high output. And then what you'll have is a controller which looks like the back of a TV console inputting the signal. And what you can do is you can drive electrical car, irrigation pumps, or a generator output. And that's probably the best duplicable device, and it's basically the inventor doesn't want his name publicized, and it's the information is going out only as a need to know for people. And that basic.
Is it possible to get it up here if we pull some money together? Have you seen one? Or?
I haven't seen one. My partner knows the inventor. The inventor used to work for some top companies, and he's built 2 prototypes. It's already in other people's hands, and they're manufacturing or in the process of raising money, manufacturing, distribution, and. There's an option on the 3rd kind of line to manufacture and distribute these devices. And I have the money to purchase a prototype and start the project myself, but I'm waiting until I have other interests to back me up before I proceed further.
Okay. Is there a need for it?
I just call the device 800% motor controller combination.
Nice short name. Thank you very much, Buster.
You're welcome. And again, if anybody didn't get the handouts, they're in the back right corner, and it's trying to write everything down.
That 8 over Unity machine will supply 20 to 25 houses. We were talking last night about a little community that we could set up our own grand jury. Need 25 people, and then you can have a. We're talking about Hutt River. and Hutt River, what is it, Territory or Hutt River Principality, that's what it is, great, in Australia, where they set up their own sovereign state. So a little engine like that would supply enough power to look after 25 homes, and you'd have your grand jury and the works. It'd be interesting. So thank you very much. That was Buster Anderson, for those who weren't here when he began.